Presidents Vladimir Putin and Barack Obama have pledged commitment to solving Syria diplomatically and preventing civil war there. The deadlock in the Middle East was just one issue the two heads discussed on the sidelines of the G-20 summit in Mexico. Ganej Chikan is there for RT.
The meeting of the two leaders lasted around 2 hours, and that's a lot for a bilateral meeting on the sidelines of a summit. The range of issues on their table was huge. The leaders came up with a joint statement on Syria. They both agreed that Syrian people should decide their own fate and that a political, not military, process is needed to prevent a civil war. That's what Russia has been saying all along. As was pointed out by President Putin, he saw common ground in their approach on Syria. It might sound surprising to many because the rhetoric so far between Russia and the U.S. has been very tense on Syria, with the two countries accusing each other of stoking violence there. On Iran, the leaders came up with a very general statement, and that is that Iran should provide maximum transparency on its nuclear program and abide by the UN non-proliferation treaty. There were some bilateral issues on the table, such as the U.S. missile defense shield in Europe. Russia still has no guarantees that it won't be aimed at Russia at some point. The U.S. refuses to give those guarantees, and arguably with the elections coming up in the U.S., Moscow and Washington won't be able to move forward on that much. All the leaders said this Monday was that they're going to continue the dialogue. Another issue, very controversial, they're attempting Congress to pass a new restricting law against Russia that would be tied to human rights. Travel ban and financial sanctions against those Russian officials whom the U.S. Congress deems as involved in human rights violation. It's the so-called Magnitsky Law. The leaders did not comment on that pending legislation, but Russian officials say if passed by the Congress, it would trigger a series of tit-for-tat moves because there is a potentially long list of American officials who could be punished for taking part in human rights violations in secret prisons in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Guantanamo. On the sidelines of the G20 summit, which was set up to tackle global economic challenges, the group of the world's most powerful emerging economies, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, had a separate meeting. They're pushing for a multilateral world, for updating old institutions like the IMF, like the World Bank, which are heavily dominated by the U.S. and Europe. They want to play a bigger role in the decision-making within those organizations. At this summit, they're announcing an additional contribution to the IMF, money that could be channeled to Europe if the crisis there spreads. It's very much clear to everyone that those emerging markets are now the engine of the global economy.
RT's Ganej Chikan reporting there from the G20 summit in Mexico. Now, a former member of the Reagan administration says no matter what Obama tells Putin in person, the U.S. president is just one link in a long chain of foreign policymakers.
I'm convinced that Putin does not want a conflict with Washington. He wants to resolve the issue of the missile bases that are surrounding Russia. He doesn't want conflict. And Obama, he doesn't want any conflict either, but he is just one member of a government that wants regime change in Syria. And Obama is not exactly in a position to be able to stop that. He will do what he can to get along with Putin, but he still has to represent the agenda of world hegemony and regime change. And so the situation, I think, is unresolved.